What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from AcTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today I am back and I have finished Despicable Me. I did. If you checked out the other three reviews of 1, 2, and 3, all with audio description, you're here now with Despicable Me 4. You have reached the final boss, Despicable Me 4, which, based on how this film is written, may actually be the final boss of the Despicable Me franchise. Should it be? Have they gone too far? Is this possible? Is there a possibility this is the last Despicable Me film? It's a billion-dollar franchise, so these are really tough questions. And Despicable Me 4 was fairly profitable at the box office. However, I think there are parts that they started inserting in here, which we'll talk about, that really indicate to me there's a chance that we've thought about making this the final Despicable Me film. So, whatever the answer to that question is, this franchise has clearly gone on too long. This is Despicable Me 4 is to cinema what the telephone game would be, in so much that it feels like it had 5 writers, but the first one wrote a script. And the rule of this telephone game was that the next person had access to make changes, whatever changes they felt like, but they couldn't remove what the previous writer did. So this thing went through 5 people and added like 5 people who wanted completely different things for the 4th Despicable Me film, and put it all into one film. So it doesn't make any sense. This is a film that constantly loses track and focus. It is a film that has no discernible plot, but has 5 discernible plots at the same time, because it can't have one vision. It has to have 5 of them. So you have very different thoughts on life. And it's a really odd film. It's the kind of film where I'm amazed Steve Carell read the script and was like, "Yes, I will do this film as is." Like it's bad enough that I'm concerned, which is why I'm not 100% sure that when they look back on this that they'll be like, "Yes, we want to do more of these." And to that point, there is a thing at the end where you can see them tying in the previous 3 movies in a way, and sort of, God, I hate when movies end in dance numbers, by the way. I'm just, but they do. And it reminds you that technically none of the villains are dead, and they're all just in this like supermax jail. And we have like a dance off party with like all of the previous villains just appearing but not being voiced. So if you were looking for, Trey Parker to show up again, or Benjamin Bratt, they don't speak. They're just there, and the audio description acknowledges that for this film. Um, so I don't even know how to describe this film. There's an old frenemy of Gru's that went to school back together, back in the day together, and it's voiced by Will Ferrell, and he has, I don't know, control over a cockroach army. Instead of minions, he has cockroaches. And he wants to be called the Cockroach Man, but it's not what anybody calls him in the film. Anyway, Gru's agency that he works for comes and gets him because he needs to go into witness protection, him and the family. So him, his wife, which is basically what she's reduced to in this film, by the way. Kristin Wiig has nothing to do here. It's amazing with 5 plots how little she actually contributes to the story. It's actually kind of amazing. And they have a new baby, Gru Jr., because of course they do. because people watched like Shrek sequels and they were like, ooh, what if we did that where Shrek had kids? And it's like, did they make more Shrek movies after that? Because I don't think they did. I think that kind of killed the Shrek franchise. But hey, you know, you do you. If that's what you want to do with your life, you do you. Give Gru a baby and see where that goes. Um, and they take the minions, which always seems to me to be like an odd task because there's always sort of like an indeterminate amount of minions. So like, how do you get them all in one place at one time? There have been some scenes like when I saw the first two films, I could see visually the first three films. I always felt like there would be shots of like over 100 minions, but then sometimes you only focus on like a few. So I don't really know how many minions he has. I don't know if anybody knows how many minions there are, but they take the minions along too, and of course the little girls go along for the ride. But unfortunately, our adorable one, I don't know how she's still adorable after 4 films. I don't know what this girl is doing to her voice. Do they keep casting like a new girl to voice Agnes? Is it the same girl? She still sounds like the most adorable child on the face of the planet. Agnes is my favorite character in Despicable Me 4 because I don't really like the rest of the film. She's not really in it that much, but Agnes is always just like the standout for me. It's just to leave her poor little goat behind, Lucky, from Despicable Me 3, which is so sad. And Agnes always makes it feel like so sad. It's always like, oh God. And I'm like, really? They couldn't have brought the goat? Now that you watch the whole film and you're like, well, why not? This film has room for everybody. Why didn't Drew show back up for this film, you know? But so they moved to witness protection, basically, with new names. They all have new names, which is hard sometimes for people to remember, but mostly Gru, although Agnes doesn't want to lie, and which is, again, adorable. She's like, lying is bad, but that's not my name. Like, you know, like she's, again, best thing that's happening in this movie is Agnes by far. But all the kids, the 3 get new names, and I wouldn't say any of them really have discernible plot lines, but they kind of do. Like, it kind of shows what actually, for really all the 3 kids, they just kind of like all have like a thing that they do, and then they kind of, you know, like, high school sucks, you know, like. Is that a plot? I don't know. I feel like, were you not going to high school before? I'm so confused. But there's another girl in the neighborhood who figures out, who's like a super fan of supervillains and who recognizes Gru, and you know, even though he's poorly undercover at that point, she blackmails him into helping her with this heist, which of course he always has to like babysit his Gru Jr. because Kristen Wiig has to go do something like off camera that is probably far more interesting that's happening in the film. So that's like a chunk of the movie. And then we have this whole plot with the super minions, which is probably the one thing you may have heard about, is that they decide to test the minions and give them superpowers. Why? It doesn't even make sense within the confines of the movie. That's what I'm saying. Like, it feels like they introduced, like somebody wrote a movie where they were like, ooh, okay, so Gru's gonna have an old friend who is an old frenemy villain. You know, from back in the day, they had this beef, and they've been fighting ever since. Done. And then they were like, ooh, but what if, because of all this family stuff, Gru was actually in danger? So then they had to go and witness protection and pretend that they were people who they were not. Ooh, so that's rewrite number 2. And rewrite number 3 comes in, and they're like, ooh, what if, what if while in witness protection, there's some random girl who just appears, who's not connected to anything, who just is like a super fan of villains, so that way Gru has something to do that feels somewhat villainous slash spy related. Uh, and what if also Will Ferrell's whole thing was that he really wanted to kidnap Gru Jr. and turn him into his own baby? And then what if, it's just like people just kept adding things. And then what if the minions had superpowers? And then it was like the last guy who had had way too many beers. Like nobody stopped him. They didn't take his car keys away either. He died. He hit a pole. He died. It was a tragic car accident. He wrote his final draft of the script. I don't even know if he's credited, but he was like, what if the minions had I am going to go drive home now. They were like, okay, I guess we'll keep this version of the script in memoriam to him because this is awful and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But yeah, that's basically the film. It's it's and it doesn't even they don't even have Will Ferrell has like a henchman slash primary villain that doesn't even get the time to be developed for me to remember who she was. Like she's in this and I recognize the voice. I was like, is that Sofia Vergara? But she's so underdeveloped here because the film has so much to achieve and it's a kid's film, so it can't go on for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it has to do 500 different things in a reasonable amount of time for a film aimed at kids. And it can't do it. It just cannot pull it off in a way that works. Little kids will always find things shiny and happy, and they'll find it silly and goofy, and they're not as concerned with plot. But this is going to be one of those films where parents sit there and they go, what the I'm going to have to buy super minions for my kids now? Like, it feels like it's a marketing ploy. So, yeah, I think of so many franchises that took a dive after the fourth film, Shrek being one of them, Toy Story being one of them. I thank God there isn't a fourth How to Train Your Dragon because I really love that franchise. Kung Fu Panda 4 is not necessarily predominantly worse than the rest, but it didn't get better. We didn't raise back up. I mean, you're kind of stuck in a place in a franchise. Transformers 4 is definitely worse than predecessors. So, very few films seem to rebound late stage. You do have some of the spy films, Mission Impossible, kind of starts to rebound. Film 4 definitely would be the exceptions to the rule for that franchise. Absolutely. Fast and the Furious. I know it's not a critical success, but fourth film is when they kind of officially bring Vin Diesel back, which sets them back on the course for Fast 5, which kind of resets the whole franchise into being something completely different than what it was to begin with. But it's also where the film franchise really took off in terms of making a shit ton of money. So, yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things like that where you can point out, but there's so many others where the fourth film seems to be the make it or break it point for a series. And the fact that at the end of it, they have this weird sort of dance off with all the past villains really kind of makes me think that they're closing the door and they're like, no more. Like Steve Carell was like, I will do this last film, but I'm not doing any more than this. The script is atrocious. The script is really bad. I don't know how they got Will Ferrell for this. I mean, considering when you look at who voiced the previous villains, last time was Trey Parker, and before that was Benjamin Bratt, and suddenly they have Will Ferrell. I feel like they somehow they got an upgrade, and I don't understand it. Will Ferrell is voicing easily the least interesting of the villains thus far, who has the least amount of screen time. This feels like what they did to his character in Zoolander 2. It's just it's bizarre. I didn't think it was going to be like this, but I really The only thing that's giving me any pause at all is that I have seen worse animation this year. This happens to also be the year of Megamind and the Doom Syndicate, so there's always that sliding scale. And of course, yeah, in terms of films ever, I've seen worse animated films. But I always also I'm able to sort of think about, well, what else have I seen this year? And it's like, oh God, I did see that Megamind sequel where they just gave up. Will Ferrell didn't come back for that. He came back for this though. Uh, wouldn't that be a shocker if I rated it the same grade? Will Ferrell questioning life choices. Yeah, this isn't good. This is the one of the three films. This is the only one of the franchise that I would actually rank rotten if I was a tomato meter approved critic. I actually don't mind the other films. 3 is borderline for me. 3, like I said in the video, I think would be that like 60 to 70 range where it doesn't get certified fresh for me. But I actually don't mind the Minions films. I think they're fun and entertaining for kids, and I like 1 and 2 enough. I don't love them, but I find them enjoyable. Here, I mean, I'm even just pissed off that Kristin Wiig just seems like you have all these storylines and you couldn't give her something great to do. Like, she's amazing, and she's been in, this is her 3rd film in the franchise. Why is she not doing more? You know, instead of adding a bajillion new characters and giving the Minions superpowers, why don't you just focus on the core characters that you have that have brought the franchise this far and give them something interesting to do as a family? If they're a growing family, write about that. You know, write about how, what does it mean for these 3 girls to have a new baby brother? What does it mean for 3 adopted children to have a new non-adopted baby brother? How does that make them feel? I mean, you have some real opportunities here to get into the weeds for kids and to bring up some topics and stuff that may actually resonate with certain kids watching the film. But they're not interested in doing that. They're interested in selling you more Minions. They just, I guarantee you, this winter season, there will be super Minions. And your kids will be like, I want the super Minions. They didn't even have that much screen time. But for some reason, your kids will feel like they need some sort of a completionist thing for their Minion thing, to have the Minions that have superpowers. Anyway, or some video game that has the Minions with superpowers. I don't know. It feels like it should have been its own movie. That should have been Minions 3, you know? Take that whole plot, pull it from this film, and make a movie out of it, and make the Minions 3 Super Minions, you know? But keep it out of this film. This film has enough going on. I didn't like this. The audio description is fine. I think it's the same narration as the 3rd film. Having watched the 3rd film in close proximity to the 4th film, I think it's the same narrator. So, that was good. That was nice. So, and there's a lot to describe here because there's a lot happening. And some really interesting sequences. I don't remember her name. The girl that just is here for no reason whatsoever. The super fan girl. She has a cat and she plays Dance Revolution with her cat, which I didn't even realize was still a thing, but she does. And I thought that scene was fairly well described, considering it's, you know, probably just a lot of jerky movements, but the cats, the 2 of them are like flipping back and forth, and then they high-five each other at the end. So, and it was nonverbal, so the whole thing had to be described. Yeah, the audio description is fine, but this film just doesn't work. If I hadn't seen worse animation, a few years ago, my worst film of the year was an animated film. It was on Netflix. It was Marmaduke. So when I think about this versus Marmaduke, yeah, I'd rather watch this 10 times than watch Marmaduke ever again in my lifetime. So there definitely are. And even this, I would rather watch, like, if somebody was like, gun to your head, you can watch Despicable Me 4 or Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate again. Well, I guess I'm watching Despicable Me 4 again, because there are bright spots, like Agnes, you know? She just really actually is great. I don't know, they it's amazing. She's so adorable for a fake character in a film. They use her in ways, like, for people she's the kind of kid that makes parents who are, like, on the fence and are like, "I don't know if we wanna have kids." And they go watch Despicable Me 4 and they're like, "I'd have a kid if it was Agnes." Like, I feel like that's a real conversation that at least some couples have had after watching Despicable Me 4. Like, I don't want kids, but I'd have Agnes as a kid. If she could just stay Agnes, how she seems to always stay Agnes throughout all the films without ever aging or her voice changing. Um, so yeah, check out Despicable Me 4 if you hate yourself. I'm giving Despicable Me 4 a C minus. Um, anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.